Okay, normally I open up here with a question to get us all thinking along the same line or thinking about the same idea. Last week I started you with an easy question. Yeah, no such luck today. This one's hard, but I hope it helps you think about where we're going. When does the truth sound like a lie? Well, you could answer that, I suppose, in many different ways. When does the truth sound like a lie? One of the side comments I made last week was that you can spot a fake. Often you can. I said it's hard to fake honesty. Even the eagle said you can't hide your lying eyes. And that's true. But also, it's sometimes easy to be misled. Truth is sometimes not recognizable immediately as the truth. Put it this way, we can be duped. We can be misled. We can think that we know the truth when we hear it, but it will sometimes be hard to know the truth if we've gotten used to something that's not the truth. Why is this important? Because Jesus came to humanity and he claimed to be telling truth to us. And he claimed that the truth that he was telling us was from God in heaven. So in a sense, asking this question is about the larger dilemma of accepting all of Jesus' teaching. Because any part of it that you hear, that Jesus might, well, he said that, but yeah, that doesn't sound exactly right, exactly true. You might think that's, and you might not want to obey it. You might want to dismiss it because of that. But how do you know what the truth is? And how do you know that what Jesus is saying is true if it feels different than what you know? All these talking heads out today are all purporting to say the truth. Jesus did too. How do you know what he was saying was true? All right, now you're getting confusing, Steve. Maybe so. Let's go to our text. Because we're going to see people who are hearing Jesus and looking into Jesus having a hard time with this very question. Right? Most of us would like to think that we can say, oh, of course I know the truth when I hear it. Right? But that puts a lot of responsibility on our own wisdom and how much of it do we have. In the passage, I think they're finding it harder than they thought. John 7 is where we are, and we're going to pick up reading in verse 10. Jesus has sent his brothers off to the Festival of Tabernacles, or the Festival of Booths, and he's going to go in secret. And we'll see there's a reason for that. So let's pick up reading. Read with me if you would. John chapter 7, we're starting reading in verse 10. However, after his brothers had left for the festival, he went also, not publicly, but in secret. Now at the festival, the Jewish leaders were watching for Jesus and asking, where is he? Among the crowd, there was widespread whispering about him. Some said, he is a good man. Others replied, no, he deceives the people. But no one would say anything publicly about him for fear of the leaders. Not until halfway through the festival did Jesus go up to the temple courts and begin to teach. The Jews there were amazed and asked, how did this man get such learning without having been taught? Jesus answered, my teaching is not my own. It comes from the one who sent me. Anyone who chooses to do the will of God will find out whether my teaching comes from God or whether I speak on my own. Whoever speaks on their own does so to gain personal glory. But he who seeks the glory of the one who sent him is a man of truth. There's nothing false about him. Okay, stop there for now, for today. Notice the way that the people struggled to come to a single conclusion about Jesus. He got mixed reviews, you might say. They were whispering about him. I love the ESV version here because it says they were muttering about him. like they were not just talking about him, but talking about him under their breath with a bit of frustration about him, muttering like, well, we don't know how we should take this guy. Some of the people said what? He's a good man. And some of the people said, no, he deceives the people. The ESV there says he leads people astray. Like he's not telling them the truth. He's deceiving them with the point of drawing them to an unhealthy place. And the issue is whether, what is he saying? Is it good? Is it intended to deceive? Because it's not true. Jesus gets that reaction from people. He polarizes the group, right? You come away from hearing Jesus with a decision about what you think about him, and your friend will come away with the opposite opinion. The people in the passage who hear Jesus are divided. He does that to people then, and he does it to people now. We need to be aware of that. We who have come to the conclusion of belief in Jesus, when we show that belief or when we speak of that belief to others, they maybe have drawn opposite conclusions about Jesus. That happens even today. Some people see his goodness, and some people see him, oh no, he's not good. He's out to deceive people. He's tricking people. So don't be surprised if you meet people who think that Jesus is tricking people. And don't be surprised if you think that. If you think, man, I'm not sure what to think about Jesus. I think he might be trying to pull a fast one on me. That's okay. You're not alone in that sensation of him. You can doubt Jesus. That's always been true. But you can also be skeptical about him and about his motives. And you could think he is false. You can take it. Right? He knows that he polarizes people. Some people see him as tricking people. And honestly, there's probably valid reasons for that, right? You might think that Jesus is not the best person because some of the people who were his followers, they weren't the best people. So there's that. And you might think, well, he tricks people because some of his followers have tricked people. And that's a fair point. But the one thing to be aware of here is that because Jesus would lead us in a path that is so different from the path of the rest of the world, that alone will seem like it's a deception just for that reason. Well, I know what he's telling us to do, but it feels so different. It feels like the Twilight Zone. Right? Because it's so different from the path that the world is on and will continue to be on. See, the path of Christ is radically different from the path of the world. And because of that alone, it will seem weird, and it may seem like a lie. Well, how can both paths be right? Well, the short answer is they can't. One of them is a lie. And when you follow the world and the path that the culture is on, the kingdom of God does look like a lie, like it's not true. Because you've been following a lie, and if you follow a lie long enough, it can look and feel like the truth. If you've ever thought, no, Jesus is lying to us, then realize the fact that the truth looks false because a lie has been prevalent, all right? And if the truth is diametrically opposed to the lie, and what Jesus is saying is very opposite to the culture. Because real lie, I want to say real good lies, or real lies that are good, are lies. You may have heard the old adage that a good lie has a lot of the truth in it. Well, real lies that are good are lies that get lived. You can live a lie and you can live in it. You can live a lie and it seems true, right? Because you grow used to false ideas. They become ingrained and you grow used to it. They become, in that sense, more than just a single thought or one sentence going through your brain, right? They become an idea, and that idea forms in your life. And it has a backstory with narratives and images and other stories behind that. See, our culture has that because it has ideas that have lived a long time, and they have formed backstories in the culture. Ideas like that are sometimes called strongholds. And in that sense, that's the point of calling it culture and not just a single idea, because culture is a grouping of ideas and a building up of them until they become something that get lived. For instance, and I don't know why I thought of this, it just popped into my head. The goblins and the bad creatures on the story of the Lord of the Rings probably thought that they were living lives consistent with truth, right? Maybe not goodness, but based upon something that was true. Why? Because they came out of that was all they knew, right? They grew up thinking what we're doing is right because of what we believe. See, how you grew up seems normal and right because you have lived it, and it's become habitual. So when Jesus comes along, and what he teaches is so different from what they were doing in the passage and what you've been doing in your life before you believed in him, or what you're doing now if you haven't accepted what he has to say, it can seem so different that your mind and your heart react that way. It's like, oh, he's lying to us. He's just trying to deceive us. He's doing this because he has a hidden agenda and it'll come out. All right? It's hard to believe that Jesus is telling the truth. Okay, so how do we know that Jesus bears truth to us and not deception? That's the dilemma that the people in the passage were facing, because it's so different from what everybody is doing in the world. Even today, that's true. So how do we know that Jesus is telling the truth? Well, more than just telling it, living it and bearing it to us to give to us that we might live in it. How do we know it's truth? What he's teaching. Because you have to admit, because based upon what goes for truth in the rest of the world, it is different. So how do you know it's true? I'm going to give you 2 questions to help you know that you can ask, and maybe 3, and they're going to seem related, I think. First, where did he get his teaching? Second question, how does his teaching play out in real life? And as you might suspect, he has something to say on both of these questions, but they're still good questions. If you want to know, is what he's saying, is what he's teaching the truth? Where did he get his teaching? How does his teaching play out in real life? And let's do the second one first, just for fun. Jesus' teaching is real wisdom if it wisely handles reality. Not only does it deal with and speak to what we discern as reality, but does it wisely handle it. It leads to a good life with a healthy heart and soul of the person who follows it. Not only in the short term, but for the whole life. Does Jesus' teaching correspond to what's true about life and reality? Because when you think about what truth is, that's what truth is. It matches reality. It is a concept that lines up with reality. That's truth. And not just part of reality. See, a lot of teachings claim to match reality. But all of reality and life as we know it, if a teaching is true, it's true across the board. It handles life and all of it. That includes its good and its bad moments. Okay? Because that's an important fact. Deception is often partly true. And in that sense, an idea that claims to be truth can appear to be matching reality, but not match all of it. A deception may seem true because it may be partly true, but is it okay when it's tested? Does it work when it meets all of life's reality? For example, and this, I know this may be oversimplified, you can party your way through life. And that seems like a good way to live for a time, for a short term, as long as life is good and smooth sailing, right? I could drink, I could imbibe in some other way, and I may feel really good. And just keep doing that and living that life. It may work for a time, but for all time? When life hits a rough spot, does it work? See, the deception comes out when the idea or the basis for living is tested. And good lies work for part of the time, but not when it hits the fan. They work for part of the time because they have some truth in them. There is enjoyment over imbibing, but they don't last long. Truth should work for all of life. It should help. It should bear witness to all of the life, the good and the bad, right? If your way of living makes you feel good for a time, but it's no help when grandpa dies, or it's no help when you get sick, how is your way of living the truth of life? See, a good lie may last for a while, but it has to explain the bad too. A philosophy of living, if it's true, has to talk about suffering. It has to deal with death and dying and sickness and heartbreak. The truth has to have an answer for the bad in life because it's there, man. So that's the first question that you need to ask about what Jesus says is truth. How does his teaching handle reality and all of it? And the second question, well, actually the first one, but we're doing it second, is where did this teaching come from? Because if this is something that just some dude made up in his head, yeah, nobody's that smart. And that's why I read with you down to verse 18 when we read. Because if there's an entity out there in the cosmos somewhere that is responsible for you being here because he created you, it seems to me like he's the entity out there who can speak truth about you and into you. The truth comes from God. He created you. He knows who you are. He knows how you are wired to work and not work and live, and so he can speak into that. He knows you. That's why the truth needs to come from him and not some other schmuck walking down the road, okay? Has to come from God because he knows you, and he really cares about you. See, he knows you, how you were made. He knows how you can flourish, and he cares enough to make that known to you. He sent Jesus. That's why when they asked Jesus for a sign to prove that he was the Messiah, he said, well, no sign will be given to the wicked except the sign of Jonah, implying that he was like Jonah. And he came to a people because God cared enough to send a message to tell them to change how they were living, even when that change was hard and they didn't want to hear it. Kind of like Jonah. God really cares about you, and he cared enough about you to send somebody to tell you, hey, listen to how God said to live. If you live the way you think is right, you're going to burn your life down. God cares. God knows abundant life. He came to tell you. You see, deceivers almost always have some agenda that they're pushing. And that's why I read verses 17 and 18 as well. What verse 17 and 18 says is that Jesus came without his own agenda. The point of deceivers is that they almost always are pushing some agenda of their own, and they want something. They want to build a platform. They want to, and not that the Christians never want to do this, by the way, but deceivers are almost always appear to care about you, but they don't. They have their own agenda. They care about themselves. Why do they want you to do this? And that's a great question to ask. Why does Jesus want me to do what he says? Is it about my good or his? Why do these other people want me to do what they say? Is it about my good or theirs? Is it because Jesus wants you to do the Father's will because it's right and it's good and it works? Not because Jesus has an agenda for himself. He's not out to build a platform. He's looking to help you. Okay, so what? In verses 17 and 18, when Jesus talks about the will of God, he does that because the will of God can stand up to reality. All of reality, not just part. He made reality. And it stands up not just a part of it, and not just the easy part either, but all of created reality. Now think about that, because it has a serious ramification. If the will of God and the teaching of Jesus works for all of reality and life, then when you follow Jesus' teaching and the will of God, and when life falls apart, God is there. God is there. When life falls apart, will any entity who wants you to follow their teaching for their agenda be there? No. Will they help you through the rough parts? Does what they say apply to the rough parts? And will they be there to help you through the rough parts? Not in the least. You know, alcohol may be there in the rough parts, but it's going to take you down in the rough parts too. God says he will never leave you nor forsake you. He wants to lead you into the truth that applies for life and works and helps for all of your life. That was why Jesus came down so much on some of the Jewish leadership. He said they put burdens on people's backs, but failed to do anything to help them bear what they were telling them. They wanted them to follow their teaching, and it was not any help, right? They weren't helping. The truth comes from God, and it's true. It will seem very different from the world, but he will be there when the world is not there, and he will keep you and he will help you. He has truth. Now, you may have a fun time letting go of the other stuff in your life. That's not true because you've lived it. It has inertia in your life. It has the power of habit in your life, and we know habits can be really powerful. But God has truth, and he has truth that stands up to reality. At the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7, which is a brilliant sermon, by the way, and understand has an order to it, and you have to read it in order. But at the culmination of the Sermon on the Mount, the very end of it, Jesus said that the man who puts my teachings into practice will discover that they work, and they work precisely in the moments of great disturbance in life, when the storms come. Jesus said, in effect, I will be there, and my truth will guide you in your worst moments. So Jesus asks you to follow him. If you haven't been following Jesus, I guess I would ask you, well, how's that going for you? And I would especially ask you, how is that going for you when life is really hard? Is it working well for you? Because the people who push what they claim to be the truth that you live by might not be around when life hits the fan and the rain comes, because it will come. And when it does, how is that working for you? Just honestly. Jesus says you can follow him, and in those moments he will be there He will not leave you, nor will he forsake you. He won't be there laughing at you because you fell trying to do what he said to do. If what you're living has not been working, or it looks like it won't work when life hits, you can begin to follow Jesus' path today and start to live as he taught. Know that it will seem weird. Different things always seem weird at first. It's like walking backwards or walking on your hands. That doesn't seem normal. But he said he came with his Father's will. Jesus came, doing his Father's will, living the life that he taught his disciples to live. He showed it. He showed that it works. And you can live it with his Spirit helping you. You can do the Father's will with all of your life, like Jesus did. That's being a follower, being a disciple, living the life Jesus taught and showed us that works. Remember, he isn't out to deceive you. He is out to show you the way his Father made you to live. Follow him. We say, come follow Jesus with us. He's the one you can believe in. You want to make a commitment to follow Jesus, you could start right now, right where you're at today, and start putting his life and his teachings into practice, and you'll find they work. Let me pray for us. Father, thank you for the gift of your Son. Thank you that he came. Thank you that he came bearing truth from you. He doesn't always look true to us. You're going to have to help us work past that sensation because we've got a lot of baggage. We admit to our baggage. Help us to deal with it and to understand your truth and live it out. Live it out with your help. We admit to needing your help. We want to follow Jesus. Show us how. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.